イタリ好きイタリビよくでねばらきましてくれて。おー、ノー、それに、あのレビLet's begin. Indeed.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you may be. My name is Brian, and welcome to the Fireside Chat. I am here with Arvis Owens, a repeat guest. Hello, Arvis. How are you doing?
Good. Hello, Brian. Thanks for having me. Hello to the audience. Honey Badger Nation.
Thanks for coming on. So, just a little bit about why you're on and what it is you do, in case, because we always have new people
Right.
that watch, and our content covers a breadth of men's issues, but this was a specific thing that I think was we've been talking about a lot recently, which is basically false allegations in the military, in
Right.
the military space. Is that a fair way to describe it?
That is a very fair way to describe it. Thank you for that, Brian.
Yeah. And well, just give everybody, because we have some new people here, give everybody like a little bit of a, let's say, a elevator pitch on like what it is that you do, when you started, and basically how you found us, that kind of thing.
Perfect. So my name is Arvis Owens. I'm originally from Beaumont, Texas. A 1995 Naval Academy graduate. I was a naval officer, and in 2013, I was tried via false accusation of sexual assault in the military. After that conviction, testified for my own defense, had numerous amounts of evidence to show that I was innocent. I couldn't get help from anyone. And the irony is the people I was seeking help for start sending people to me. So there were so many men in the military who had experienced the same thing. And so I became the advocate for them that I wanted to find for myself. And so that's how this happened. And the reason why your audience should care is because while we say false accusations, it's if you've ever had someone lie on you in your whole life and someone believed that lie, even though you had evidence to show that it was a lie, that is the enemy here. And so the military was pressured during the Me Too movement. And the idea was we want more prosecutions and we want more convictions. So we've got DNA proof showing the guy didn't do it. We still want a conviction. We've got a video showing that the accuser admitted she lied and she was under pressure. That's why she did it. Still, they were convicted. And this not only happened in the military court system, it happened in their administrative system. It also happened on university campuses throughout the United States. So this is a huge men's rights issue. The military, it was more systemic and probably more damaging because you had men who committed suicide, didn't have access to their children, sent to prison, etc. So yes, today I advocate to bring attention and awareness so families who are considering military service can at least ask these questions.
Yeah. And you've been doing this for how long now?
I've been doing this for 12 years.
12 years. Is this like your, I've been meaning to ask, is this like your main, like, is this like you have a job and then you do this on the side, or is this like where you put most of your energy?
I'm actually not working now, but so this was I don't want to call it a labor of love. It's a necessary, I don't want to call it a hobby either, because it's more than that. It's more of a passion. It was, again, I could not find anyone. You go to any large group and people they don't want to hear about men being falsely accused or wrongly convicted or mistreated, except for podcasts like yourself, Paul Elam, who I did a show. Thank you for helping connect us together. So that's where that came from. It's what I do, and it turned into a passion where it's been all consuming. So it's what I do, but I do not get paid for it. I do not charge the men I help. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah, it's just like something you think is just really important, and
It's very
set aside like the cost of these things. I get it. I've been doing it for 12 years, and it's not profitable. I'll tell you that. But
right.
but
Right.
yeah. But so you've been at this for 12 years, and would you say that like it was like, how was the going tough in the beginning? Do you think that it's like it stayed difficult? Has it been getting better? Like, what's your outlook on like the trajectory since you started doing this?
So no, you're right. It was very tough in the beginning. It was nobody wanted to hear this. You have a lot of they call themselves victims rights organization. They get government grants. They get millions of dollars from billionaires and millionaires. They also have access to mainstream media. And when you want to talk a men's rights issue or someone getting falsely accused, the mainstream media will set you aside. Algorithms on social media will choke your message so it's not broadcast to the widest audience. So very difficult. And so I started going to podcasters, people like yourself who are interested in telling the truth. You guys do your homework. We show you the evidence, and then you're like, okay, we want to talk about this. And so that's been the best thing, is that I think the American people, they're losing trust for traditional media, because if they're keeping stories like this from you, it's like, what else are you keeping from us? So we've had much more success with podcasters. And recently we've had some active duty podcasters come on board, and they have been amazing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So there's like podcasters that like they normally just talk shop about military stuff,
Yes.
maybe, or they're like, yeah, and then they came on. So like what was I'm curious about that. So when you went on these shows that don't normally talk about men's issues, but this came up as a thing, like did you get pushback from them? Were there people saying I don't believe you, or maybe there were I'm sorry, you got like a technical
Yeah, it was just I got to plug in the laptop because I thought it was plugged in, but it is not.
Oh, and it's like dying.
And
This happened with another guest I had on here. So anyway, yeah, when are you good now?
I'm good now, thank you.
Okay,
Sorry about that little glitch.
No, it's fine. This is live show. These things happen. It's not a big deal. We're doing okay considering it's live. So yeah, so when you went on these podcasts that would normally just be sort of, maybe they weren't about men's issues, they were about the military more broadly. When did you get any pushback or skepticism about your issue, or did these guys, like when you brought this up, they were like, oh, I got stories, or I have some experience with this kind of thing?
A mixed bag. So I will tell you one podcaster in particular. So some of them are like talk shows and they do other issues. Some of them are military centric. The military ones, they knew. A lot of the military ones knew. I've had some that I've had to go to for years, and then they did their homework and they were like, holy shit, this guy is being honest. He's very real about this. So a mixed bag. In fact, as an example, Teresa Carpenter, she does the Stories of Service podcast, the one I sent you the link on, is when she saw it, she's been in almost 30 years. She was like, Arvis, I knew this was happening. I didn't know it was this big, and I didn't know what the cause was. And so you had a lot of people in the military who knew. So you're right. We've had active duty people now. They're still on active duty. They were aware of it. They just didn't know how deep it was until we spoke and we did our podcast.
Yeah.
So, mixed reactions.
So then, yeah, I mean, it makes sense to be a mixed reaction. I wasn't sure because we were talking about the sort of like, I guess you could call it a culture of silence, or a culture of like, not wanting to talk about this, but just sort of like speed running through the process of just getting the conviction, because there are different reasons for it. Like you mentioned the Me Too movement. I think that's a big part of it. The fact that they're using Mary Koss studies as sort of like the foundation of why this needs to go through. But there's probably also like a desire to protect the military's reputation by saying, 100%. Okay, let's just get this through. That 100%. Way we don't have to talk about it. So you would think then too that there's a possibility that if you bring this to somebody who, like, they have a military centric podcast, or even if they don't, they hear this and they're like, well, I can't, like, there's like a certain mythology about this that I can't like disrupt. So, maybe I'm just going to like avoid that, because I know that people used to be like, whoa, dude, that's going to get me in trouble if I like listen to you, if I hear this out, or even, worse yet, like advocate for an investigation into these things. So like, that was why I was bringing it up. So, you know what I mean?
Mike, Brian, I'm sorry, you're 100% right. Is that we do have some people who it's a money thing. is the military invests billions of dollars in ads. And so that was especially true with the mainstream media. I've had investigative journalists who saw this, and they have said that this is the largest military justice scandal in the history of the U.S. military. I want you to let that sink in for a second. The largest military justice scandal in the history of this country. But yet, a lot of people are scared. They get money. They're scared that they'll lose revenue sources and things like that. So you're right. That's how it happens, is that people are fearful to speak out. They're fearful to lose anything associated with their platform. And let me touch on some of the broader political issues. And so you brought up the political side. That's very much a big part of it. It was, and I want to encourage your audience, probably mostly men, but all, to register to vote. Because a lot of this, I think, stems from the fact that politicians will cater to the female vote. And let me tell you why. It's because in every demographic, women vote at much higher rates than men. In fact, the only one I think it's equal is if you have a four-year degree, it's equal. Other than that, women vote at significantly higher rates. So you have these feminist organizations, a lot of times they'll go to a politician and says, women will vote for you if you do this. Even though women are, they're smart, they don't want to support false accusations, but these groups seeming to represent their interests go to the politicians and says, if you change these laws, if you make it so, and we found in family court, men in family court are often treated very poorly, and it's systemic because they've leveraged this voting power to get the laws changed so that there is a disparity, there is an imbalance. And so a lot of men don't know, and men tend to go in caves. They say, well, there's nothing I can do, and that's the wrong answer. So thankfully, there's people like yourself who do this, who put out this message, and it's hard because most algorithms, they're going to suppress you. In fact, I think someone coined the phrase shadow banning. It's they'll let you put it out, but instead of marketing it to the entire audience, you get a sliver. And so I don't know if you've seen that, but it's the same thing when we try and express this.
Yeah. Well, there's a reason. Yeah, the reason too is that I think men generally don't tend to be as, like, say, interested in voting because, first of all, they're not really looking for the government to give them something, right? Like they're not looking for they just want to be left alone to sort of pursue their own destiny or whatever. And if they do vote, which they did in the last election in record numbers, but if they do, it's because they're afraid that the state is, the state is overreaching and they want to scale it back. So they're less likely to vote because they're more likely to think they have more of a libertarian mindset about things. But this is sort of to their detriment because women are definitely more interested in using the state to get things done. So men almost have to kind of balance it out, at least, right? It'd be active just to prevent an over, let's say, overcorrection or overstating on women's part. And this is why women are often the ones catered to by both parties for the vote, because they know that women are more likely to vote, and they're also able to get women to sort of coerce them into voting for stuff that they want, so they can get state power, whereas men are less interested in state power to do things. So this is it's kind of an internal conundrum too, because the weird thing is, and I don't want to make this a political, that much, but I am a pretty political guy. But I remember building up to this last election, I was looking at all of the sort of advertising that the Harris campaign was putting out, and it was all directed at women. And there was one that in particular that stood out to me, which was about essentially telling women to vote against their husbands. I don't know if you saw that one, but there was one where these women go into the voting booth with their husbands, and their husband apparently, was voting Trump or something. And the women were like, I'm going to go vote now, honey. And because the vote is secret, the suggestion, I think what Julia Roberts did, she read over it or something. And the suggestion is that since he doesn't know, you can vote against him. And I thought it was wild because I was like, if you are married to someone, why would you have diametrically opposed views? I mean, I know that there's often a little bit of wiggle room, but usually your partner shares your values. So there's like there should be, it shouldn't be a thing. And I think that most of the time it doesn't happen. I just think that this is sort of like there's this desire to drive a wedge between men and women, and everything is an opportunity to do that. And that is to create a voting block of women, which they kind of have done. So at the end of the day, it's got nothing to do with like policies or sex or gender either way. It's always just been about power. And there's just like, how do we get the most power? Well, we know we can get women to vote for us if we scare them, into thinking that what terrible thing will happen if they don't. This is why there's all this fear mongering, or all the Handmaid's Tale, they're gonna lose their rights, all this. And also there's like another thing to do is they use sort of like a desire to get revenge on men as a group by
I would share that two things with your male audience, and then I'll make a connection back to the argument you made with the female stuff. Is number one, when it comes to voting, think you may not want the government to give you anything, but you don't want them to take.
Yes.
And so
I agree.
I call it the lesser of two evils. Is if someone said, and this is a horrible example, but I said, you can be shot or burned alive, right? They both suck, right? But one sucks a little bit less than the other. And so
for sure,
use that metaphor, but people usually understand it. And going back to the division you talked about in the voting household, you're 100% right. And I think the mistake that really opened that door was they were pushing a lot of the transgender into women's sports. And so women kind of woke up and said, whoa, whoa, whoa. Okay, now you're going too far, when people have been saying, no, they've been going too far in your name.
But now it's affecting you. It's in your,
And you're right. And so, so now it's, if you saw some of the Harris campaign, you saw, okay, I've got a Glock, I've got this. Is at the last hour, all of your policies have been anti-male, but you want to appeal to them, and you think that they're smart enough not to understand that. And then the same time with the ladies is that ladies have different issues that they find important, and voting against their husband may not be the answer. Also, they have issues that are on this other side that they want addressed. And so it's really about holding politicians to what makes sense. And I'll give an example with the university side. I also work with them a little bit. It was when President Obama came in, he did a Dear Colleague letter. He basically said, if you want funding, I want you to make the system like this. So as an example, when we talk about equity and fair and equal rights, it was this side you give an attorney to, this side you don't. This side present evidence, this side doesn't get a copy. This side can testify, this side doesn't get to cross-examine. The person who did the investigation, same one who does the ruling. And so you go, wait a minute, you created an imbalance. You wanted this, but now you have this. And these were cases in the civilian side that never even went, or they tried to send them to civilian court, and the police said there's either not enough evidence or there's no evidence. But administratively, they did this. And then when President Trump came in his first tour, all he did was due process. He did this. And then President Biden came in, he did it again.
Brought it back.
Trump came in again, he did this. And so what I tell your audience is it's important to vote, because if you don't hold your politicians to account, they'll keep doing this. They will.
I mean, you can do so in a reasonable way without necessarily wanting to, while also keeping the government under control. Part of it is doing that, because we don't want the overreach. But okay, so I'm gonna put the political stuff over here for a second. So what would you say has changed the most? Well, actually, no, before we do that, have you looked, because we talked about how this sort of started around the time of the Me Too movement, but I think it's much older, because you brought up President Obama, and the Dear Colleague letter was put in while he was in office. So that was before the Me Too movement. But have you ever wondered or looked into whether or not this thing in particular with the military that we're talking about could have even predated that? Like maybe going back to George W. Bush or Bill Clinton or.
So there was something in 1991 called tailhook. I don't know if you remember that story. So carrier aviators have a hook on the back of their plane. They land on an aircraft carrier to stop. There was a conference they had, and there were allegations of aviators partying. So if you've seen Top Gun, you've seen what that looks like.
That a bunch of dudes playing volleyball. I'm pretty like
Yeah,
Val Kilmer and
partying and drinking and hitting on Kelly McGillis, stuff like that.
and then they go to the restaurant and sing the song. Yeah.
So there were allegations of impropriety. Navy Criminal Investigative Service did an exhaustive investigation, and none of them faced criminal charges because based on the evidence or the lack thereof. So you had a lot of politicians who were upset about that. And so I believe
upset that there weren't convictions
correct,
and that they okay.
Correct. So 1991 and then fast forward to the 2010, 2011-ish time frame is now they want results, and results equal prosecutions and convictions. So you're right. It is a much bigger thing, and so systemically, you change the laws. And I'll give you an example of one that will really scare you. You ready?
Yeah.
So in the military, it was in the last National Defense Authorization Act. So it was the one last year to start January 1st of 2025 under the Biden administration. It was that in the military now, sexual harassment is 2 years in prison and a dishonorable discharge. It's the only place that exists, and it gets worse. There are some people who believe if you look at them too long, you're sexually harassing them.
I was going to say, what constitutes sexual harassment? Like,
they changed it so it's easier to get a conviction. So I tell parents, I go, if your son looks at someone too long and they say their eyes are up here, will they be prosecuted? Language, right? Profanity is what are the odds you're going to hear profanity in the military? I think it's 100%. But if someone internalizes that, I'll give you an example. If you or I in a closed door office and you tell me a dirty joke, let's say, and the door is closed and someone's on the other side.
And they overhear it.
And they overhear sexual harassment. So 2 years in prison and a dishonorable discharge.
Like the Billy Bush, the hot mic, yeah.
Right. The hot mic is that enough? And it's systematically changing these laws to make it easier and easier to get conviction. So that's what I tell men. We go back to the voting and asking these questions that if we're not active, if we don't say, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense, tell me about this, then things like this happen in the dark.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because that's kind of what I was getting at. So like why I said, let's go, if there were like things like this happening before the Dear Colleague letter, before the Me Too movement, because I think that this is like a very old problem that's just been making very small steps, like little nudges towards the point we're at now. And based on what you just told me, that sounds like, I was going to bring this up just as an aside, but did you see what they just they just did this story in the UK about undercover female joggers so there's female cops disguised as joggers, and they're jogging on the street in the UK, and the purpose of it is to catch catcallers. So like now in the UK, they don't have the First Amendment, and there have been, I remember this, but this is something that I just learned about like yesterday, I think, that they're basically have women and they're in pairs, they're attractive. They put on, like exercise clothes, like tight yoga pants, and they go for a jog. And I guess if a man flirts with them, or if they get catcalled or sexually harassed, which again is very vague, like it could be anything. It could be a guy leering. I think one of them even said, like, if they stare too long, right? So, and I wonder, like, is this kind of a fetish thing? Like, are you doing this to get attention, but then you want to be able to punish men? Like, do you like? But anyway, it's so ridiculous that I'm like, this is just beyond the pale. And yet what you're describing is that happening here. And this country is still the freest, but that's ridiculous. You know what I'm saying? Right. So yeah, but like there are, I don't know what the penalties would be in the UK, but I wouldn't be surprised because they had banned, I think they banned or made it illegal to catcall in Nottingham and like a couple of other places. In Scotland, they made it to where it's illegal for you to boast about sexual conquests in public. So if you're like in the pub and you're like hanging out with your mates and you boast about somebody you like a date you went on or something, and somebody overhears it and they don't like it, you can go to jail.
And
crazy.
That's where the U.S. military is going. I had not heard about that. The sad part is it doesn't surprise me. Is there's a gentleman who he's on X that he and I communicate. He's in the UK, and he tells me crazy stories like this. I mean, it's appropriate. You got the Union Jack on your shirt to represent the craziness that's going on. But it doesn't surprise me. And it's why I tell people, I even tell women, and I want to be especially clear, is we don't support sexual assault. We don't support sexual harassment. The idea, though, is I'll give you an example of a friend of mine. She has large breasts. And so her thing is, if you look at them too long, she considers that sexual harassment. And so I asked her, I said, well, how many seconds can they look? She said, what do you mean? I said, how many potatoes? Like 1 potato, 2 potato? And so she goes, 3 potatoes. And I said, okay. And then the next person, is it 3 potatoes? Is it 4 potatoes? So if he goes 4 potatoes or 5 potatoes, does that warrant sending him to prison and put him on the registry and give him and it's, you get quiet because you're like, this is where we're going. And if people don't speak up, it'll get worse. And then it'll happen. And to your point, people will say it was have you ever heard of the boiling frog principle? Where they That's what it is. It's a boiling,
the slow boil of the frog. Yeah.
Boiling frog that if you don't stop it now, you're like, well, it's just the military guys. I won't worry about it. Okay. It's just the college and university guys. I won't worry about it. Okay. Now it's here and it's everyone.
Well, it is. People are losing their jobs. Like, I mean, granted, it's not in law because there's still a chance to keep that, from becoming like a crime, but that doesn't mean they're not going to. That's why I pointed out it's like these little nudges that have been going on for a very long time. Where we are now, we probably would have found it absurd 20 years ago. Right. It would have been absurd, but now it isn't absurd. Now it's reality. So this is like why I'm bringing it up. And the other thing is that I want to tell people to like, it's sort of like to help us see the signs. We want to look at the canary in the coal mine so that we know what's coming and we can nip it in the bud before it gets out of control. So, for me, the way it starts is that I don't, maybe this is radical, but I don't think it is. I don't validate the Me Too movement at all. Like, I don't say it was a good idea at the time. I don't validate it at all because we already have laws in place. We already have things that should have been done that, if you didn't do it, like if I got mugged 10 years ago, I can't make and I didn't report it. I can't make a police report now and expect justice to be done because I didn't, as an adult, I didn't do anything when it happened. I didn't address it. Right. I think that's the right thing to do. And the reason is simply because it's not because I want to be cruel. It's because we have to operate it's very important that we hold on to these principles of due process. And so the Me Too movement is built. It's not legal. It's not legislative yet. And that's the thing, right? None of this is binding. It's just a hashtag on the internet and nothing can be, let's say, none of it can be corroborated. So somebody can just say something, anything, attach a hashtag to it, and we're supposed to believe it. So I think that it starts with not validating it at all and only looking at okay, did you file a report? Let me see the report. What's the evidence, right? That's it. And even if everything is above board and he was guilty and he goes to jail, whatever it is, that even though that's all true, it doesn't mean anything about our society. It just means something about that guy, right? It's not like or that girl, because women will do it too. It's because the problem is that if you start looking at things in these systemic terms because there was an experience you had once, then you will make, let's say, collective guilt will become the norm, and then you'll have collective punishment that will follow. And that's where we're kind of teetering on right now. So I have to that's my approach, at least to sort of keep the damage from spreading, but also, look out for these early signs,
So let me give you an example in the military to kind of drive that home. So they were doing training in the military where they were saying, if you're the partner who got penetrated, if you had one alcoholic beverage, you couldn't consent, but the other partner could. So I want your audience to think about that. You go out for your anniversary, you have one glass of champagne, your birthday. And now this guy is a sex offender who can go to prison because you had one drink. You can drive legally in any state or territory in the United States after one, but they're saying you can't consent. And what's hurting true victims is that they're allowing the false accusations to come out. I mean, if you look at pop culture today, there's a guy named Justin Baldoni, and you have 19 groups who wrote an amicus brief, a brief of support to the person suing him, even though he's presented all of his evidence via social media, right? He's got a website, he's put his evidence out because he doesn't believe that the legal system will support it. And so what is heartening to me is you have a lot of influencers who are seeing that evidence and they're like, wait, this person's lying. This person's not being truthful. And a lot of them are women. And they're surprised that it's happening, but you're like, wait a minute. To your point, those systematic changes have been happening. And so now even there's some of them who are saying this is ridiculous. Like, you've gone too far. Justin Baldoni is a feminist, right? Is
very much so.
If that guy doesn't have a chance, then none of us.
Yeah, I remember Justin Baldoni putting out a PSA when Me Too started, and he was going on about like how he's a good man and he's not going to do these things that these other men would do. And now here he is, and I'm like, I'm sorry, but when you run with wolves, you're going to get bit. But yes, he was the one good man, which is what we call these kind of virtue signaling male feminist types that will say, oh, most men are trash, but not me. And then it's only a matter of time before. And I don't even think he's guilty of anything, but it doesn't really matter because he was accused. And now all of, his friends turned against him because he's on the wrong side of that allegation. So
That's right. And it's, you don't see other groups. You see some podcasters. I have seen some, but you don't see any of these big organizations rallying to do amicus briefs for him to say, wait a minute, it's, well, yeah, we know the evidence doesn't support what they're saying, but it's important that they have the right to say it because that's their experience. But you're like, even if it doesn't fit, even if the evidence doesn't support, and I want your audience to really understand that is we support true victims. We don't want people to be sexually harassed. We don't want people to be harassed. I'll diverge from the SA side a little bit. I have a friend, a white female friend who, she was in the military army. She got falsely accused of being racist, right? To someone who was black. And so now here's the thing that most people don't know. Her husband's black. Their child's biracial, but the investigators didn't know that. So it's the person wasn't doing her job. And so this person I know punished her. And to retaliate, she made a false accusation. And when the investigators came in and they saw the picture and they go, oops, it's hard to prove this because of this. Brian, they changed the charge. They changed the charge to get her. And what I shared with her was when I was in the military, I had an African-American man file charges against me who says I was hard on him because he was black. And my commanding officer laughed and said, Arvis, I've never seen this before. It was because he was doing something wrong. I was going in there having him corrected and he was going to be punished for it. But once he filed that charge, it took 2 weeks to clear me. I could not punish him for the wrong he had done because it would be seen as retaliation. And so that's why I tell your audience is false accusations, or someone lies and says something about you that is not true. You have evidence to prove it's not true. It could be your workplace. In fact, I ask women all the time, I said, has a woman ever lied on you? And so far, I have not found one who said no. They've had one.
Of course.
and then they go, well, why would she lie? Oh, she was jealous. They'll have a litany of things. And so then I said, then why would you ever say believe women? Why wouldn't you say believe evidence? Because if two women accuse each other, you're going to have to use evidence. So why does that change if one of those is a man? And I get blank stares, Brian. I get a lot of.
Oh, I know. I get it. I was gonna say, well, I got a super chow, but let me read that first. So Richard Beier gave us $5. Thank you, Richard. And he says, it's not just registering to vote, but it's actually showing up to the polls. Remember that AOC won her seat because only 4% of the eligible voters turned up to the polling stations. If you don't show up, then someone opposed to you can get in office. Let's not forget Cowboy Sam pitching how he was man enough to vote for a woman as well. All right, thank you for that. Yeah. Oh, I was going to say. So yeah, no, you do advocate for victims because false allegations that like you can be a victim of that, and it's very traumatic. Like there are studies that show that people who have been falsely accused, even if they're not convicted, just like it's because it's such a heinous thing to them, it is like it is as psychologically harmful as actually like being a victim. So I think that when you advocate for the falsely accused, you are advocating for victims.
Right.
And that's another thing that we have to like change the perspective on, like we have to stop thinking that false allegations are not harmful. I mean, I don't know if you remember, this is a weapon that gets used for a number of things, but if you might remember Justice Kavanaaugh, Brett Kavanaugh, who was trying to get into the Supreme Court, and what did they do? He got accused of a bunch of stuff, and if it wasn't for the fact that he had like kept a record of like everything. He had like a binder of his whole life or a diary or something. If he didn't have that, then, who knows where it would have went. But I remember him breaking down because the allegations were, stressful on him, his reputation, and his family. I mean, his kids have to hear this stuff. Also, Johnny Depp, same thing, right? His children were getting bullied at school by other children who claimed that, their father was a wife beater. Because, and that was because the media got behind Amber Heard and everything else. So, like, yeah, I think that, people who have been accused falsely are victims. That's another thing that I think, we have to change the language around so that.
Right. I 100% agree. I 100% believe that people who are falsely accused are victims. And I'm going to go a step further is applying a victim label when there's no evidence to support it. So if you notice, I say accuser. But you have people who will say you're a victim. Wait a minute, the facts don't support this, but they will give them that title before any evidence is looked at, and it's incredibly wrong. We've had judges come to us, investigators, prosecutors, defense attorneys, even general officers, quietly to say, "Look, we know this was wrong. There was pressure to do it, and so we had to do. If we didn't do it, we were going to be replaced by somebody who did do it." And so that's the sad part, that it's going back to I love that super chat where the guy goes, not only you have to, you got to show up, you got to vote, and you got to demand of your politicians, look, like, what's your position on this? Hey, we want this. And it's only by doing that where they're going to represent your interest. And so you silently protesting by not voting hurts nobody but you and the collective. Is you have to go and make your presence known. And I think that's why I'm grateful for people like yourself doing shows like this, because it educates. And so one person will tell 10, and then they'll tell 10. And then you will see events like you had more male voters come out. And now you see certain parties going, well, maybe we were too hasty. Maybe we need to consider men in this. But guess what? You should have always considered men.
Yeah.
Because it's about equal rights. It's not about this. It's about this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that it starts again by changing that language a little bit so that becomes normalized. That's why we're interested a lot in the culture, because that's where people learn to get their values by by exposure, right? They see it around them. Like people in the chat are talking about how these kinds of allegations are used in family courts so you can get access to kids. And I know, guys, I mean, I'm still married. It's going to be 10 years this year. I hope that we go for another 10. But I know guys that have gotten like just absolutely dragged. And it's not just about like them losing money or losing their house, but it's about when like they get into the courts and that woman that they were married to is like, they don't even know them anymore. Like they're completely vicious. And I've seen it, and it's ugly and it's painful. So yeah, I mean, there's a number of ways that this like comes out. So, but let's going back to the military thing. So what would you say Well, let me ask you this. How would you say you have been changed by this in your time doing it? Like what's changed in you as a person after doing this for 12 years?
So I'll tell a story and then I'll connect it to that change. So I had a mom come to me one day and said, Arvis, I am so grateful you were falsely accused. And I'm like, what? Like, 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 did I hit your dog or something? And she goes, no, listen. She goes, I thought the generals would support my son when he went in. I really did. But if you hadn't been falsely accused, then who would do this? And I said, look, I get it. You thought the generals and the admirals and the politicians and whoever would. And I said, and so did I. And so I think I was naive because I thought that there were institutions and people who believed in due process and equal rights, that, there are large organizations that I thought would come to people's defense, and they fought to make sure things were equal. So one of the biggest changes, I see that that's not necessarily the case. And I was naive about it. I really was. A lot of men are. The example you give, I have one where it was a military member. He was falsely accused. He got found not guilty of all of the sexual assault charges, but they put some military-centric charges in there to get him. His ex-wife used the fact that he was charged to get full custody of their children. He has to have another independent person there just to see his son.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're right. It's weaponized. And so I guess my naivety was stripped away about family courts and justice and doing the right thing when it comes to institutions and people and believing that. So my faith in people and institutions really took a hit. That's one of the biggest changes, if that makes sense at all.
Yeah, yeah. And how like were you surprised at the scope of these issues after your experience with it? Did you think you were the only one, and then it was like, whoa, there's a lot of people.
So that's the irony. I knew it was happening. I didn't know to the degree. So as an example, I had she was a Navy paralegal at the one time. She saw 500 cases in 1 year at like one Navy base, and so she's a paralegal at the time. She answers her chain of command. She said, "This is wrong. What are you doing here?" And they fire her, and she's the number one. She's number one E6. So she's the number one person of all of the East in that job to get her to be quiet. And so I had to wait until she retired, and then she did an interview, and then bam, they scooped her up and gave her a job. So now she can't speak anymore. And so you're right. Is that let me give something that's hopeful that also helped change me. Is that there are good people, men and women out there who know this is a problem and who've come forward to say, look, this is bigger than I thought, because they've added to the story. Is we have a victims advocate, for instance, who used to work for one of the companies. It's a nonprofit, and she got upset because she was forced to put false accusers forward. And so she's the one who shared with us, wait a minute, they're teaching people how to win their case with zero evidence. And you're like, wow. And there's secret Facebook groups, kind of like that Are We Dating the Same Guy kind of Facebook groups, but it's how to win your case with zero evidence. So we were able to do that to people because it was a true victim came forward and says, I don't want this. So you're right. On one hand, my faith was very damaged in people and institutions, but on the other, as we do this and as people look at the evidence and more people help us put our message out, I am hopeful, because the American people are resilient and they're coming out of their shells and they're saying, hey, this is wrong. We don't want this. So I know that was a very long answer to a short question. So I hope it got out there in something I said.
No. Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. So you've been making a lot of connections. I remember when we talked the first time, you made some friends. You have a little like team of people from kind of all over the country, and they all have wild stories to tell. Do you like meet up with them like on a regular basis? Do you guys do any like sort of like in-person meetups or anything like that?
We have, when it makes sense to do so. Mostly it's phone, it's Zoom, it's conferencing, but we have in the past where people have come in, or I've been able to go there and we'll meet, and it's that shared history. And you're just like, wow, it's And that's the biggest thing is when people go, hey, it's not just you, it's not just your family. And I will tell you, some of the staunchest supporters I have are women who have been victims whose sons have now been falsely accused. And they say, wait a minute. Yeah, in the 60s or 70s, I had to deal with some stuff, but my son was falsely accused. This is not what we wanted. This is not progress. This is not equal. And these same people are saying, what about equal responsibility? What about equal accountability? And that means what happens to false accusers? Should they be punished? Should they be put on a registry? Should they go to prison for what they're doing? So you're right. I was floored when I found out how big the situation was. I also was thankful that I was able to help. Again, this mom who said, I'm so grateful for you being falsely accused. It took me back at first, but then I kept listening and she said, wait, it's because if not you, who? And there's a quote I saw that I tell people, and I forget who said it, someone famous. He said there's 3 types of people, more or less. He said there's those that see when shown, and those that don't see. So we're doing these podcasts to help those who see when shown.
Yeah, that's for sure. So I was gonna say one other thing. When we talked about this last time, we talked about how this isn't just like a men's issue, although that to me is the most important thing, but it's actually like a national security issue because men, when this is going on, nobody wants to join the military. And it's keeping them out because you feel like these people don't have your back, and we're talking about really young guys too, right? Like they're 18 and they're, full of piss and vinegar, and they want to like go out and, basically be all they can be, but they are also young men with high testosterone, and there's women around that like a man in uniform. So there's all kinds of problems that can be introduced. And so this is like this could be it is a national security issue. But now that we have, let's say the military is not the same military it was, a couple of years ago. Do you know? Because I don't know if you talk to people that are in the military still, if you have like some connections there. You do. Okay. So do you know if there are any steps, like either, on paper or conversations going on that are going to attempt to address these issues?
So we do have people on active duty. We have general officers and admirals who tell us stuff quietly, privately. So I would tell you there was a task and purpose article. I don't know if you had a chance to look at it, where it talked about one service.
Yeah.
Right. The Army said, hey, we're going to start going after false accusers. So now we want to. Now they haven't.
We covered that. Yes.
We covered that.
Yes. We covered it on our news show. We did. That was like a couple weeks ago.
So what you're starting to see is that there's politicians who are starting to wake up, and politicians are scared because, again, we talked about the female vote and then they have their own skeletons. So they don't want to come forward on this. And then some admin person they had working for them is like, hey, you looked at me for 4 potatoes.
A lot of them have skeletons. Yeah.
Yeah. So we are seeing changes. In fact, I want to applaud. I have victims' rights groups now who are contacting me because of these podcasts, and they want to partner, and they've seen false accusers. I have one, she's very prominent. She gets paid to speak at events. She's very, very prominent in the community. She saw 3 of her colleagues falsely accused men in the military. And I asked her, I said, did you say anything? She said, no. She put her head down. She's like, Arvis, you know what? I knew they were doing it. I knew it was wrong, but I didn't have the courage to speak up. And so they're coming out. And even the feminists, even the victims advocates are trying to partner to say, you're right, is we want them to stop. We want to do more. And we feel bad because we didn't. We saw it. And it's crazy. And I have one female who was falsely accused that I work with, just the one. Now her case was dropped, but there's still ramifications for her. It was an ex who got upset with her and look, surprised everybody. But like I said, thousands of men and to date the one lady I've seen.
Yeah, it generally usually is the men. But so like what's next for you guys? What do you guys got? What's next in the books?
Here's what's next is what I'm starting to see is more military podcasters are coming forward. Is you asked about that courage, is a lot of them are starting to have the courage to say, you know what, enough. And there's a video I have, and I can share it with your audience if they want, where there was a group, they did focus groups on bases. And you had military members standing up saying, we're tired of the false accusations and we're tired of them not being punished. And so do you know what that group tried to do to poo-poo their concerns away? They said, well, it's not really a false accusation, it's a training issue. And they went back and said, because these people are being told that the penetrated party can have one drink and not consent. So if you regret having sex and you had one drink, well, then guess what? Now you can relieve your conscience. And so now military podcasters are starting to be more vocal. They're starting to come to us a little more. And so I think it's a different thing now that these insiders are saying it. They're having that courage because they've seen others do it, like yourself, like Paul Elam, who's amazing, like Terrence Pop, who's incredible, who are representing men's rights issues. And it's people like, wait a minute, these guys are telling the truth. These guys are actually educating. So we're starting to see momentum pick up, and we're hopeful. But you're right. There's the embarrassment, and then there's that voting population that people are scared of. So education is the way, man. So you're doing great work. You've got amazing courage. We appreciate you for being out there, and we appreciate your audience for taking the time to not only hear the message, but to tell somebody else about it. So that's incredible. Thank you. Honey Badger.
Well, no, thank you so much for coming on the show and being like, you know, an advocate for this stuff. And look, I think that the more you talk about it, the more this gets out, even if it's, you know, I think there's like this conversation is how I always seen it. It's like a conversation. It's been getting out into everywhere in its own way. Like sometimes, you know, you may not like, maybe somebody brings it up in a way you don't like, but at least they're talking about it. And I think that ultimately what will have to happen is people will be sort of like forced to confront it, right? Like maybe they'll avoid it, like you said, the people who don't want to see, but eventually when it looks like everyone else is seeing it, they're going to be like, okay, I'm going to see what this is about.
Right.
And I think that's when the courage will come too. Because I think that sometimes for people, it comes down to like, well, I don't feel like it's safe to bring this up. And then, but they do feel that way, you know, like but they don't really know, like if they bring it up, it's going to be harmful to them because it's a very unpopular opinion. So you just need those few people that are willing to say it, that are just like, I got nothing to lose, fuck it, right? And after a while, then those people will start to say, okay, I guess it's safe for me to say what I think, and then they'll come forward.
You're exactly right, Brian. And you'll appreciate this. I even had people from Canada reach out, and they're like, "What's happening?" And look, I'm going to say this: nobody hates Canadians. Everybody loves Canadians, is what I thought. But you know, some of them have reached out, and they're in that false accusation system too. But I never heard it.
Canada's worse. I'm almost positive. Canada, the UK, Europe, they're in worse shape in terms of like due process. Like we have it at least on paper in the Constitution, but it doesn't pan out that way in a lot of cases, or at least there's a workaround. Like, oh, we won't throw you in jail, but you'll lose your job, you'll lose, you know, your money, you'll be living in a trailer or whatever. But in those countries, yeah, you can go to jail for that stuff. Like they don't have. So yes, Canada's bad. Like we have a lady named Diana Davison. She's Canadian. She talks a lot about false accusations, not necessarily in the military, but across the board. And, you know, she's a busy woman. There's a lot of work. So, right. Yes. So, anyway, so as well, giving the chat one last chance to make any comments if you guys want to, but I feel like this has been a good conversation. And it's good to see you again, Arvis. I'm good to see you doing well.
Thank you.
And yeah, I don't think anything's coming through, so we're just going to wrap it up there. But tell me a little bit about this website you sent me just now, Teresas Tapestries. What does that have to do with the military? I just
so I'll give you
go ahead.
She is active duty until like 1 September. I think she retires, but she's an active duty public affairs officer. So they're the ones who put out the message of the military. And she's a commander. She's an 05, so she's senior. So she had the courage to have me and several others on her podcast. And not only did she have us on her podcast, she looked at some of the evidence. She looked at all of the evidence. She took some of it and she put it on her site. And I'll give you an example.
I see it.
She said, "Hey, Arvis, I had a military attorney, reach out." And she sent them the evidence and said, "Look." And then they shut the hell up. And then she had some other people, some victims advocates come forward. And they're like, "What are you doing? You're a woman." And she's the victim. She's a victim too. And her perpetrator was another woman. And she shared that during the interview. And it surprised me because I didn't know that. And she's just showing them the evidence. And all they're doing is this. They're being quiet. They're saying, "Ooh, you want me to look at true facts and evidence? I want to just hit you with my emotions because you're doing this." It's a betrayal of women. So we're so thankful for Teresa because she's had the courage to do several shows with us, as well as to put that out there. And people are looking, and because it's coming from a woman, because it's coming from a senior active duty military officer, that they're like, "Oh, wow." We have another gentleman, his name's Daniel Irwin, active duty Army, he had the courage to do a show. And all pandemonium broke out. And he saw how many people came to him who were active to thank him and says, "Thank you. Oh my God, someone's saying this out loud." And it blew him away. And I told him, I said, "Look, you're active duty. Teresa's getting ready to retire." He says, "Man, this needs to be told." So again, Teresas Tapestries has some of the evidence that your audience can see for themselves. And there's more, but we don't want to overwhelm people. We want them to say, "Look, just don't believe us. We want an independent review to look at this. But once you do it, we want the false accusers, the judges, the prosecutors, the investigators, the politicians, all throughout that chain who did this to be punished," right? Once you see it, we want that big investigation. But look, we're willing to prove what we're saying.
Yeah. And I think that, like I said, I do think that there is a shift, a change in the winds, as they say, because I'm seeing like that not only are there tabling discussions about, due process, not just in the military, but in general, but they're also talking about punishments for false accusations, like provable, like if you can prove that it was false and not just incorrect or whatever, right? And I think there was one of the southern states is doing that. And of course, advocates groups are losing their minds, but I think it's absolutely crucial because, I'm sorry, but we have to, we have to be adults here, and what's right is right. It's not even about equality, it's about justice. So, so anyway, with that said, I'm going to end the show here. Thank you, Arvis, so much for coming on, and thank you guys for joining us. If you guys like this video, oh, and by the way, links to all of your things are in the description. The various websites you got up, like your X account, which I don't know why I'm not following you on X. I got to get on that. I don't know why I'm not.
I got restricted on X. They
oh really?
So I still have
Elon Musk.
I still have it, but Elon's not loving him some Arvis these days, and so I do what I can though. I do what I can. I still post.
Yeah. And wouldyou.care and the websites change.org, your Yahoo email. So if you guys want to send him a message, he's very good about replying to those things. And thank you so much for coming on the show, and thank you guys for watching. If you guys like this video, please hit like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed, hit the bell for notifications, leave us a comment, let us know what you guys think about what we discussed on the show today, and please share this video because sharing is caring. Thank you guys so much for coming on today's episode of the Fireside Chat, and we'll talk to you guys in the next one.
Thank you for having me.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.